The Nightland, Chapter 2. The Last Redoubt. Since Mirdath, my beautiful one, died and left me lonely in this world, I have suffered an anguish and an utter and dreadful pain of longing, such as truly no words shall ever tell. For in truth, I that had all the world through her sweet love and companionship, and knew all the joy and gladness of life, have known such lonesome misery as doth stun me to think upon. Yet am I to my pen again, for of late a wondrous hope has grown in me, that I have, at night in my sleep, waked into the future of this world, and seen strange things and utter marvels, and known once more the gladness of life. For I have learned the promise of the future, and have visited in my dreams those places where in the womb of time she and I shall come together, and part, and again come together, breaking asunder most drearily in pain, and again reuniting after strange ages in a glad and mighty wonder. And this is the utter strange story of that which I have seen, and which truly I must set out if the task be not too great, so that, in the setting out thereof, I may gain a little ease of the heart, and likewise mayhap give ease of hope to some other poor human that doth suffer, even as I have suffered, so dreadful with longing for mine own that is dead. And some shall read and say that this thing was not, and some shall dispute with them. But to them all I say not save, read. And having read that which I set down, then shall one and all have looked towards eternity with me, unto its very portals. And so to my telling. To me, in this last time of my visions, of which I would tell, it was not as if I dreamed, but as it were that I waked there into the dark, in the future of this world. And the sun had died, and for me, thus newly waked into that future, to look back upon this our present age was to look back into dreams that my soul knew to be of reality, but which to those newly seeing eyes of mine appeared but as far vision, strangely hallowed with peacefulness and light. Always it seemed to me, when I awaked into the future, into the everlasting night that lapped this world, that I saw near to me and girdling me all about a blurred greyness. And presently the greyness would clear and fade from about me, even as a dusky cloud, and I would look out upon a world of darkness, in here and there with strange lights. And with my waking into that future, I waked not to ignorance, but to a full knowledge of those things which lit the night-land. Even as a man wakes from sleep each morning, and knows immediately he wakes the names and knowledge of the time which has bred him, and in which he lives. And the same while, a knowledge I had, as it were subconscious, of this present, this early life, which now I live so utterly alone. In my earliest knowledge of that place, I was a youth, 17 years grown, and my memory tells me that when first I waked, or came, as it might be said, to myself in that future, I stood in one of the embrasures of the Last Redoubt, that great pyramid of grey metal, which held the last millions of this world from the powers of the slayers. And so full am I of the knowledge of that place, that scarce can I believe that none here know. And because I have such difficulty, it may be that I speak over familiarly of those things of which I know, and heed not to explain much that it is needful that I should explain to those who must read here in this our present day. For there, as I stood and looked out, I was less the man of years of this age than the youth of that, with the natural knowledge of that life which I had gathered by living all my 17 years of life there, though, until that my first vision, I of this age knew not of that other and future existence, yet woke to it so naturally as a man may wake here in his bed to the shining of the morning sun, and know it by name and the meaning of aught else. And yet, as I stood there in the vast embrasure, I had also a knowledge or memory of this present life of ours, deep down within me, but touched with a halo of dreams, and yet with a conscious longing for one, known even there in a half-memory as Mirdath. As I have said, in my earliest memory I mind that I stood in an embrasure high up in the side of the pyramid, and looked outwards through a queer spyglass to the northwest. I, full of youth and with an adventurous and yet half fearful heart. And in my brain was, as I have told, the knowledge that had come to me in all the years of my life in the redoubt. And yet until that moment, this man of this present time had no knowledge of that future existence, and now I stood and had suddenly the knowledge of a life already spent in that strange land, and deeper within me the misty knowings of this our present age, and maybe also of some others. To the northwest I looked, through the queer spyglass, and saw a landscape that I had looked upon and pored upon through all the years of that life, so that I knew how to name this thing and that thing, and give the very distance of each and every one from the center point of the pyramid, which was that which had neither length nor breadth, and was made of polished metal in the room of mathematics, where I went daily to my studies. To the northwest I looked, and in the wide field of my glass saw plain the bright glare of the fire from the red pit shine upwards against the underside of the vast chin of the northwest watcher, the watching thing of the northwest, that which hath watched from the beginning and until the opening of the gateway of eternity, came into my thoughts as I looked through the glass. The words of Esworth, the ancient poet, though incredibly future to this our time. And suddenly they seemed at fault, for I looked deep down into my being, and saw, as dreams are seen, the sunlight and splendor of this our present age, and I was amazed. And here I must make it clear to all that, even as I waked from this age suddenly into that life, so must I, that youth there in this embrasure, have awakened then to the knowledge of this far back life of ours, seeming to him a vision of the very beginnings of eternity, in the dawn of the world. I do but dread I make it not sufficient clear that I and he were both I, the same soul. He of that far date, seeing vaguely the life that was, that I do now live in this present age, and I of this time, beholding the life that I yet shall live. How utterly strange! And yet I do not know that I speak holy truth to say that I in that future time had no knowledge of this life and age before that awakening. For I woke to find that I was one who stood apart from the other youths, in that I had a dim knowledge, visionary as it were, of the past, which confounded whilst yet it angered those who were the men of learning of that age, though of this matter more anon. But this I do know, that from that time onwards my knowledge and assuredness of the past was tenfold, for my memory of that life told me. And so to my further telling. Yet before I pass onwards, one other thing is there of which I shall speak. In the moment in which I waked out of that youthfulness into the assured awareness of this our age, in that moment the hunger of this my love flew to me across the ages, so that what had been but a memory dream grew to the pain of reality, and I knew suddenly that I lacked. And from that time onwards I went, listening, as even now my life is spent. And so it was that I, fresh born in that future time, hungered strangely for my beautiful one, with all the strength of that new life, knowing that she had been mine and might live again even as I. And so, as I have said, I hungered, and found that I listened. And now to go back from my digression, it was as I have said, I had amazement at perceiving, in memory, the unknowable sunshine and splendor of this age, breaking so clear through my hitherto most vague and hazy visions, so that the ignorance of Esworth was shouted to me by the things which now I knew. And from that time onward, for a little space, I was stunned with all that I knew and guessed and felt, and all of a long while the hunger grew for that one I had lost in the early days, she who had sung to me in those fairy days of light that had been in verity. And the especial thoughts of that age looked back with a keen, regretful wonder into the gulf of forgetfulness.